The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall Rover.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Monday, another week in paradise.
Yes, it is. Another week in paradise and another headache to start. 6 days until Christmas. 2 more shows before Christmas. And I want to first let our viewers on the internet know this show will be available to you later on this afternoon via YouTube. We are not currently broadcasting live on YouTube, and we may not be for the balance of the year. We will attempt to bring this back as soon as possible. With our new broadcasting system, we're having just some technical difficulties, and we really want to do without them, to say the least. So, right off the bat, Mark Dion hit it on the head, I guess. I'm not sure.
Well,
you'd have to let me know about that, but you know, a health club idea that will make taxpayers sick. You know, I wrote about this as well in the Weekend Flush, and it really is kind of questionable. As you know, and I brought this information to you previously, Chip, in regards to the fact that these companies make a lot of money on what they call administrative costs and fees. Now, the argument that a lot of these places use is that, well, the utilization was higher. And we spoke about this last week. Well, if the utilization's higher, then the savings should be higher. Doesn't that make sense?
yeah, well, it would. And you know, those questions were asked at the last meeting. I have said that I was, you know, I'm not talking about a health club. I belong to my own, you know, gym, and but that's another issue. But you know, Mark, and you know, I know what Mark's point is here, but it's about you know, who's paying for it. And let me preface that remark by, you know, I used to go to that building once a week for my mother to get an allergy shot. My mother worked over 55 years in a sewing shop, so she began working when she was 15 years old, barely 15, and maybe 14, I think, I don't know. But she worked for a very long time. I went to that building, but look, the clinic itself was an idea. Now, I don't think there's been due diligence about a lot of things, and now there's another factor in about the overall costs, because as you said, you found an article about administrative costs, and I think all those things have to be looked at. But the concept itself, I want people to understand that everybody's, you know, up in arms about the city. Look, this is going to save the taxpayers money if we can come up with a system that will save money in health care. You know, we see that when they have that thing in Rhode Island now, neighborhood health. And there are these clinics and companies that charge less for services, even on the national news, for regular, not only city employees. There was an article about, there was a segment on the national news about some woman who got $1,000 back from her health care, or a couple $1,000 back, because she went and shopped around. There's even an app now to find a procedure that she saved almost $14,000 on by not having it in a hospital setting that she originally had it scheduled for. The clinic is not bad for the taxpayer. The clinic is good because it'll hold down health care costs a little bit, and that, of course, the city's always looking for taxes. But with that being said, we have to deal with the fact that this affects every single individual in the health care plan. The Insurance Advisory Committee does not represent, their advisory does not represent every single member in the plan. As I said before, the Public Employee Committee does by statute. Every bargaining unit has to be represented, and they represent all their membership. And we have to look at percentage of utilization. And we have to talk about who's going to pay. And if the city can buy a building to save millions of dollars, that's not a waste of taxpayers' money. It's saving taxpayers' money. If the company itself can find a space and factor that in and we still save money, there are a lot of options that haven't been discussed yet. And I want to make it very, very clear that none of those options were discussed, and the characterization before the council that the Insurance Advisory Committee was on board was a misrepresentation. It was a half-truth. The Insurance Advisory Committee is on board with creating some kind of system of clinic or thing to override the fact that many people don't have primary care physicians. They run to the emergency room for things and get exorbitant costs. Obviously, it's an intelligent thing to look for things to keep healthcare costs down. We can't control drug costs. We know how they gouge everybody. We can't control certain things, but we can use the market to try to negotiate lower cost testing and lower cost medical fees, et cetera. This is a good idea, as an idea, as a concept. But as usual, we're not giving it the due diligence I think we need. We're talking about the concept of a clinic. Now we have to go back and revisit this individual company because, as I said, you came up with that thing about the administrative costs, so we have to look at that. We want to get the best bang for our buck. Am I in favor of doing this? Yeah. But who pays for it, how it gets done, is a part that really never was discussed. I said at the last program, there is absolutely no way I'm going to vote to use mitigation money that was set aside to help the workers defray some of the new costs incurred when the city shifted a $3 million a year on an average of co-pays over to the employees, some of whom are only making $28,000 a year. And I've had people actually crying at meetings because they couldn't afford the bills they were getting for stuff that used to be covered. And so, is this a good idea? Yeah, the concept is good. But we need, and I don't have to tell you, CJ, you're a healthcare professional. This is a real minefield. You really got to be careful on what you do, as you well know, dealing with Medicare and healthcare, that this is a real minefield.
Yeah.
And the fact is that this thing needs to be done the right way, and I'm not going to vote for anything unless it's done the right way, and I've gone on record at the last meeting. This has got to be a PEC issue. We've got to do more, and I am not in favor. Of the retirees I represent, probably 60% or 70% might say, I'm not going to go to that clinic. I've had the same doctor for 50 years. Well, why should I take money out of the mitigation money that was used for 100% of the people in the plans to satisfy, 30 or 35% of the people who are going to use the clinic?
I agree. That's reasonable.
That is not, a position I am willing to take. We need 100% of the people to be represented. They are only represented if you have the PEC, and I am not gonna put up 50% of the money. I'm not in the real estate business, and I said at the last meeting, I'm not purchasing real estate. And if, as Mark said in his article, and something may have a point, if the demand is out there to do this and the city doesn't want to do it, well, maybe all the employees, if they believe in this idea, can pitch in, and we can buy our own building. They did it in Boston. The Boston firefighters bought their own building and created their own union hall. The idea was posed in my union, and we seriously looked at it. Never came to fruition, but these things are all viable. But the concept of saving money, but as you know, this is not, You know, the city loves to go, you know, head first into the wall and break through, because anything they want to do, anything they've decided that they don't care. And you, as I well know, is nobody knows better than you how complex and how difficult these things are.
Every day I'm taking classes online and going to online programs to try to work out the diagnostic codes, because we went from an ICD-9 to an ICD-10.
Yeah.
Okay? That was a whole nother world, and it's still not worked out. But you know, I gotta give Mark, you know, credit here. Although when I mentioned it to him, he kind of was like I care. He said that he's going to make a treasonous comment. I thought that was funny. The administration doesn't even know what kind of service will be offered in the new wellness center: a gym, a yoga, dentistry, minor surgery, methadone. They don't. They have no idea. So he's going to make a treasonous comment. And remember, who cares? Bums like you and me have no business asking. Shut up and pay your taxes.
and fundamentally, he's right with the city, but it's not true with certain people that are on these committees. I am very concerned about finding out exactly what we're going to do, and exactly if we're going to get what we bargained for. As you said, we looked at presentations; everything looked pretty good. The numbers we got. Now I have to ask a question based on that article. From the Billings Gazette. I have to ask if there are any kind of hidden fees.
There are other articles similar to that.
Yeah, and this is the thing. So there are questions, and as you said, you know, these things are all, you know, there are so many ways to manipulate the healthcare system. Like I said, this is a minefield. I deal with this. Like we got an estimate from Caremark, and they're nowhere near those things. The cost went up 15%, and there's no more. It's not because of greater utilization. It's because they figured out ways to charge more for things. They take things out of their formulary, and then it's out of network. And instead of paying the $35 for the prescription that you were told you were going to pay for that prescription, now you're paying $125 instead of $35. And they say, well, you know, if you don't want to pay the $125, you can, you know, tough. You know, you either take what we give you. There are all kinds of tricks that they use to circumvent their original bid. And they'll say, well, you know, this is no longer a network. This is no longer this. You know that. I know that. And this is the thing. This is not, I mean, on face value, say, okay, this company said, we're going to save you millions of dollars. But let's make sure that they are going to save us at least close to what they say. And then secondly, there's a second piece to this. Where is this thing going to be located? And have, you know, and that issue and how it's being paid for was, number one, never brought, and where the money's going to, was never brought before the IAC formally. And they talked about buildings, but how it was going to be funded was another issue. It's never been voted on, and it's irrelevant. The vote's irrelevant. It is an advisory committee, and not all the bargaining units are represented, whereas the PEC, the law mandates that all bargaining units are represented. They have a vote. They have weighted votes depending on the size of their memberships. And if the city and the employees don't agree, there's an arbitration procedure set forth in that law, which obviously to the average person with a modicum of intelligence would say, these are the people you should be talking to. Because the fact is, you got somebody on the IAC that's made up of 7 people from the union and one from the retirement for the retirees, and you have the same vote in that committee as everybody else. Because if you represent 80 people at DPW, and I represent 2,000 people and over 2,000 retirees, you vote, I vote, we've got the same amount of votes. And that's not one man, one vote. That's a disproportionate weight for them. That's why the PEC has a weighted vote system. 10% is given to the retirees. The remaining 90% is broken down by statute by number of members. and then they get to vote, and they get to represent their members. And that way, everybody gets a voice, not just the people on the AIC. And the characterization, it's the same people, is not true. Not all people. Many people on the AIC are also the PEC representatives, like me. The fact is, well, I'm on the IAC, but technically, you know, I'm Dave's the president, I'm the vice.
Right.
If he's not there, I'm there. But or sometimes we're both there. But the reality is that there are bargaining units that are not represented on the IAC, and again, for the billionth time, they're advisory. They can only make recommendations. They cannot enter into a negotiation on how to use that mitigation money legally. And I said that at the last meeting. And the city, again, is doing it wrong. And the mayor got on the radio and basically just didn't have a clue on what he was talking about. But that's nothing new.
Now the second most weighted vote would be the school department, the teachers union, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Because they have the highest proportionate number of members
Exactly.
next to the retirees. So let's get into this, because remember, this building is the old ILGWU building. But weren't we talking about using the Bank Street Armory for this purpose not that long ago?
Yes, we were.
Imagine that. So
Yes, we
now
were.
that we know that over $12 million needs to be utilized to make that building usable, which, by the way, it appears by my conversations with the governor's office and with Mass Development, they weren't aware that these reports had already been done. And I sent them the Stark report, the architectural report. So let's look at this, okay? Because the albatross, we got a couple of albatrosses hanging around the city's neck. Okay, Bank Street Armory. They just got $25,000 in a grant. We spoke about this briefly last week to do a study. You love studies, don't you?
Another study. How many times have we studied the Bank Street Armory already? You know?
So, and the mayor, in his petition to Mass Development, said that they're going to do this study to determine whether or not they can create a co-work environment. Okay? Nobody knew anything about it. Now, let's look at this. $283,000 from CPA. $33,000 plus or minus from Mass Historical. That paid for the Stark report, the architecture report. $283 was emergency repair money for the roof. Still not done. Although the mayor's request says that that money is being utilized to start those repairs. They still haven't been done. Where's the RFPs? So, again, a city where money is no object because it's not yours. It's the taxpayers.
And we lose it, never find it, too.
Exactly. So then we start pitching the City Pier. Now, this is an albatross that's been hanging around our neck since the late 1970s, early 1980s. The city took land by eminent domain. And another artifact of government incompetence. So, first off, you had Karen Polito down here approving $1.6 million in Mass Works grants because the city finally signed on, which we talked about a year ago on our show, to the compact. Okay? Now, on top of the $1.6 million, they got $600,000 from Mass Development, $600,000 from the Redevelopment Authority, which I'd love to know where they got that money. And now they got $1 million from the Seaport Commission. So that they can, according to what I'm interpreting, and again, this is my interpretation, which could be wrong, the city plans to put a marina and restaurant for the City Pier. And they want to get this done where they backfill it, so they bury the contamination, which is legal currently, but who's going to pay for it when it eventually breaks through? And then they're going to have a private company or individual come in to finish the project. So in other words, city tax dollars, state tax dollars to make this place usable for something Fall River desperately needs to increase its tourism on its waterfront, a city pier, to privatize it like Board and Light Marina, owned by former City Councilor Michael Lund, who never paid his water bill, for them to come in and charge and gouge everybody who needs to use the marina. We could use 125 slips for people like on the 4th of July when we have ships all out there and people want to come on board or get off board. They want to offload and they want to come onto the city property to go to restaurants and maybe grab a bite to eat before the fireworks and then go back to their boat. And it would make sense for city residents to have access to a slip on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis so they can keep their boats in the water. Does that make any sense to you, Chip? Am I just like living in a fantasy world?
Well, you know, you may be making sense, but you know, we don't have. This is the reason that government is always out of money, because they get, no matter how much money they get, it disappears and they don't do what they intended to do with it most of the time. Now, I'm looking at this article and it's really comical, because when you look at this, and now we have Mark Monroe Dion saying, and the administration doesn't even know what kind of services will be offered in a new, quote, wellness center, unquote, a gym, yoga, dentistry, minor surgery, methadone. And then in the article about the City Pier, okay,
Joe Good.
it says here by Kevin P. O'Connor, according to this, that's the byline, but it says that it's not just the government that's driving this project, Polito said. You have the economic development agency pushing and private business involved. And then the next line, again, listen to this. There are no firm plans for the city here. You know, it's the city's redevelopment authority, which owns the land, hired a consulting group to draw up. So give us $1 million, 1.6 million, while we figure out why we need that 1.6 million. And we're gonna just give us the money, and we'll figure it out later. And that's why what happens is, as you said, the roof at the Bank Street Armory still hasn't been begun. They gave them money for it. We've got a health center that they want to spend money on that they really don't know definitively what's going to be done. And now we got a City Pier that's going to, a $1.6 million revitalization from the state, and we don't know what we're going to do with that. You think that would work in private industry? You think if you went to the bank to try to borrow $1.6 million for a project, that if you went to the bank and talked to the loan officers and they said, okay, you want $1.6 million, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. We're going to figure that out later. Really? You think you're going to get a loan? Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that you're going to get money when you have absolutely no idea? When you can't put down a plan? That's the first thing they ask you when you get a business loan. We want to see your business plan. We want to see what you're going to do. We want the numbers. We're going to invest, we're going to let you borrow money to do something. You better prove that it's going to work, because if you don't, we're going to eat this loan. That's not the way it works in the real world. That's why my buddy, my favorite economist, Milton Friedman, said, if you gave the government the Sahara Desert, they would run out of money in 5 years.
They'd run out of sand in 5 years.
They run out of sand. That's right. Run out of sand in 5 years. And you know something? This is a classic example. Taxpayer, be angry, be outraged at the city, be outraged at the state, because this is politicians giving other politicians money so they can put things like this. We're going to revitalize the City Pier. Well, and I see Mr. Fiola talking in this article too. And I will tell you, many, many, many years ago, too many years for me to even try to remember that I have to remember this, but I was on the Heritage State Park Board when they wanted to build the carousel.
Oh, you mean the 1 million tourists a year?
And I gave that report to former city councilor Kozak, never got it back. But I had the report by Ken Fiola, then a fairly new member of the Office of Economic Disaster and Destruction. he said there'd be 500,000 tourists a year, and we all know how well a carousel worked out. So, just like the Bounty, the HMS Bounty, I think it's down in Tahiti again. But the fact
No,
is...
it's actually underwater.
Yeah, I know.
It's gone.
I know. It's sunk, but on the way to Tahiti. But this is the problem. You should be outraged. You should be outraged by what they do with our money. And they can say anything they want about Donald Trump. He's won some, he's lost some, but he understands that there's accountability in his world. And this is maybe what we really need in government, because this is the problem. Another 1.6 million, and that's your money.
That's right.
That's your money too. We pay state taxes too. We don't only pay this city for all their mistakes, but we pay those clowns up in Boston more of our hard-earned money. And we pay the feds to waste millions of dollars on programs that don't, like building a natural gas station in Afghanistan, yeah, and wasting. That was on the.
But the thing is that will the people of Fall River ever wake up? Will they ever require accountability? Will they ever say, for instance, let's just pick one off the top. Hey, people, let's get together and sign this initiative petition to have the city do a forensic audit, or to restrict the sale of the City Pier so that the city maintains ownership and management of it so that the city residents can benefit from it. Why don't you hold your people accountable? Because, you listen to the misrepresentations and lies of, well, we have a great plan for this, but we can't discuss it right now. I love that line. I'm going to emblazon it over City Hall because it's truly becoming the mantra of the Carrera administration. And we have a great plan, but we can't go into it right now. We can't discuss it.
Yeah, well, that's when the people are supposed to rise up and say, well, it's our money that you're paying for this plan with. Yeah. So we have a right to know.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it just gets to be, more and more, comical when you're dealing with this. But... we spoke about it briefly, but, Joe Camara tried to stick it to Linda Pereira, and it just made the paper, I guess, last night. And, it's a joke. It really is a joke. And why has this type of behavior become so prevalent in the city council chamber? And you wonder why people say it's the city council? I think what Fall River needs, besides an enema, okay, because really it's getting ridiculous, is to truly, and I mean truly, elect people who have a strong constitution to say, I don't care, too bad you don't like it. And I keep saying a Trump-like candidate. Now, I'm not saying we go out and start racist statements or anything else, but really demand accountability, something that we haven't seen in Fall River in I don't know how many decades. No political favors, no political payoffs, which a lot of that's going on right now. So require this accountability, because you know what? If you don't, nobody will.
Yeah, let's put things in perspective. I mean, the vote that she missed wasn't on the budget.
No, it wasn't.
It was on some.
It was to break the ground for a gas main.
A gas main, and she was choking on a cough drop. So rather than do the Heimlich, Joe Camara decided to jump all over her about this, and obviously this is a personal issue that's now begun. But I mean, let's put it in perspective. I mean, this wasn't like somebody running out of the council chamber for a budget vote or a real important vote. So let's remember, we have to stay angry at government because all they do is use their favorite formula. When in doubt, take the taxpayer money and waste it.
That's it. Waste those dollars. Hey, we'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great day.
Yeah, it's almost Christmas.